My name is Ginny, also known as 2/3 Lotus, everywhere on the internet. This clip is part of my series, The Poets of Twitch, where I analyze my viewers' writing live on stream. Nothing has been edited out, so you're seeing this exactly as streamed with all of the imperfections and tangents that come with being live. If you want to catch me live or want more information, check out the description. Otherwise, enjoy some excellent writing.
A Shitty Habit by Shake My Spear. Shake My Spear has talked about in chat before writing poems that are sort of more comical as to be more accessible, which I really like as a thing to do, because I think we spend a lot of time as poets, or a lot of poets, maybe we don't, but a lot of poets are kind of gatekeepy, kind of elitist, and we don't really like them. So what we do like is poems that are kind of silly and fun. And this is definitely one, as far as I can tell. iPad, I used mine to draw. I'm not actually that good with reading writing. Really elitist poet. There are many. And I've done some drawing on this iPad as well. Various things, but I don't really do it a lot, and I'm not very happy with my writing. You'd be surprised, yeah, it's really bad, the degree of elitism in poetry, and I think this is one of the reasons why poetry is not a very popular thing. Is there's a lot of people who really don't like to make poetry accessible to broad audiences. Who is this by? Shake My Spear. Shake My Spear. Reading and book is actually the number 10 spot of your hobbies. Sounds like you have a lot. Then. So, short little poem, and there's some notes from Shake My Spear. There's some questions. Are you able to effortlessly recite this poem? Does the rhythm flow seamlessly? And that is because there are some specific notes on how the meter of this poem is to sound. So it's an experimentation with meter. Wanted to write a silly, stupid poem that has hidden layer of depth. Gross and distasteful on the surface, but like a poop, hiding kernels of truth, perhaps a metaphor for repressed feelings. Is that a profoundly dumb and disgusting way of phrasing it? Yes, and I'm sorry for that. Anyway, the meter of this poem is pretty funky. The lines alternate between Dibrak trochee and Dibrak trochee catalectic trochee. So like unstressed, and then stress and stress, stress and stress, stress and stress, and then unstress and stress, stress and stress, stress and stress, stress. So these are straight up words that I don't know. So I'm learning. So Dibrak. Copy. I mean, this is referring to probably two unstressed syllables. A metrical unit with unstressed syllables. Okay, beautiful. Also called a pyrrhic. Oh my gosh, I love this word. Two short syllables. Okay. And then catalectic trochee. I'll explain more of what this all means once I know what this means. Dude. Ah. It's good that I learned this stuff. Trochaic. So form 7th century, early. 15 syllables, short, axis ans, long, short, anceps, either long or short. Okay, I'm not quite getting what this is, but I presume it is just stress and stress, stress. Sus. So basically, what Shake My Spear is doing is creating a structure with two unstressed syllables into a stressed and unstressed syllable. So like da da dum, da dum, da dum, da. And then da da dum, da dum, da dum. That's the sound. And we'll see if that comes through and if we can say it seamlessly. So, had I had the inclination, I'd have done it long ago. You can call it constipation, but I like to let it grow. Like, this is what's happening in this poem in terms of meter. So, a lot happening. But basically, we go da-da, dum, da-dum, da-dum. Inclination. Had I had, wait, sorry, I messed that up. Had I had the inclination. I am actually like failing to do this right now. We're doing notation. Dash is unstressed. Slash is stressed. Had I had the inclination, I'd have done it long ago. So that is, I'd have done it long ago. This is what has been made. And it will theoretically continue throughout the poem. So now we know how to read it, and I'm going to catch up on all the things you all are saying in chat. Okay. Oh my gosh, y'all are saying so much. ADHD, difficult reading comprehension, love listening. Well, this is a great place to listen. Petting cat. Not really related to elitism, but once my school did an unspoken poetry analysis test and gave a super abstract and ambiguous poem from local author. They had a whole answer sheet with things they were looking for. Oh, I would kick ass at that. Turns out the local poet submitted it, was mostly just blabber and abstract meaningless work on a Reddit post complaining about it. Okay, that's crazy. That's very funny. Cats. Ida is a word. It's like I would have. Shake my spear. Hey, look, it's you. We're doing your poem. We're just starting. And we were breaking down the verse, as you had said. So we have vocabulary term dibroch or pyrrhic. Is this dash dash? Pyrrhic. Da-da-dum. Had I had... Okay, so I'm going to read it. We haven't actually read through it yet. A shitty habit. Had I had the inclination, I'd have done it long ago. You can call it constipation, but I like to let it grow. When I think of all the matter that's amassing down below, I imagine how much sadder I would feel to let it go. So I'd rather let it fill me, should my stomach still permit. Though they say it's gonna kill me, but I'll never give a shit. Shitty habit by Shake My Spear. So I think the meter definitely makes sense once explained. I think if I just read this, I would be sort of confused as to how to do it metrically, but it definitely works. And it gives it a fun bounce. Had I had the inclination, I'd have done it long ago. You can call it constipation, but I like to let it grow. When I think of all the matter that's amassing down below, I imagine how much sadder I would feel to let it go. So I'd rather let it fill me, should my stomach still permit, though they say it's gonna kill me, but I'll never give a shit. It works. I like it. If you don't mind me being here, I have no intelligence and my English is not my main language. You are so fine. It literally doesn't matter. And yeah, it's shortened I have. That is Ida. Fantastic username, definitely. We're super international here, most of us. Yes, it is. So many people speak so many languages here. And I never let my ignorance stop me from yapping. Yes. Just yap. Just be here. Community. Waiter Melanie. Like, that's what we want. So, in addition to this structure, we have a rhyme scheme going on. And it is alternating lines. Shun, shun, oh, oh. So, beginning with just a simple A, B, A, B. When I think of all the matter that's amassing down below, I imagine how much sadder I would feel to let it go. So we're doing the same thing. Just C, D, C, D. And then, so I'd rather let it fill me. Should my stomach still permit, though they say it's gonna kill me, but I'll never give a shit. I wonder about, okay, well, hold on. Me and me, technically a rhyme. That is definitely E. And then F, E, F, E, F. Now, looking at the meter itself. So what we're trying to do is two unstressed into stressed, unstressed, and then continuing either ending on stress or unstressed. The rhymes are fill me, kill me. Oh, clever. There you go. I like it. So I'd rather let it fill me. Rather. That's fine. Never. 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 Okay, yeah, definitely. That's right. It still takes me a while sometimes to figure out stressed and unstressed words. So basically, any word has some pattern of stressed. If we have two syllables, we can be unstressed then stressed. We can be stressed then unstressed. We can be sort of balanced, but that's less common. And sometimes it can be hard to tell. Like, let's look at never. Just saying it, you're like, never. It feels like pretty flat, pretty even. But we can try to say never, forcing it into like both of these configurations. And then it's pretty easy to tell which syllable is stressed. So if we say never versus never, never, never give a shit versus never, it's pretty clear that this is what's happening. Stressed then unstressed. Because I was sort of for a second like, wait, is never an IAMP? But usually if you just sort of actually speak through it, it's pretty easy to tell. And when writing anything in verse, at least while you're new, would highly suggest like reading everything out loud. And in some capacity, like read everything out loud all the time when you're writing, because it helps you hear it in another way. But it tends to make things clear. So it works, is the point. From Indonesia. I like the 2-camera setup. Thank you. I think it works well. So, yeah. Sound is like pretty straightforward. Maybe there's some internal rhymes though. Okay, we have some repetition. Had I had. And that's fun. Had I had the inclination, I'd have done it long ago. You can call it constipation. So, but I like to. Oh, okay. We're doing like some very alliterative stuff inside this poem as well. Can call it constipation. CCC. Like to let. We're doing L and L. Can we do that in orange? So there's actually like a lot of sound stuff happening. Da done. I'd a done. Had I had. You can call. But I like to let it grow. When I think of all the matter that's amassing down below, I imagine how much sadder I would feel to let it go. Think of all the matter. So there's like definitely less happening. I imagine how much sadder I would feel to let it go. When I think of all the matter that's amassing down below, I guess sort of like an ing and an n, but it sort of stops. And so I'd rather let it fill me. Should my stomach Should my stomach still stomach? Should my stomach still permit? So I mean, now we have alliteration, kind of. Stomach still, yeah. Though they say it's gonna kill me, but I'll never give a shit. So you kind of like set up in the first stanza. Also, matter, imagine. Oh, matter, amassing, imagine. Yeah, sadder. Okay, so there's like more assonance here. But I would say regardless, in the beginning, we have like a ton of this happening. Had I had, you can call, like to let. These are like very like dense and close together. And we then sort of break away from that. And I think that's fine. It's just something to note that we go from a lot to maybe a little less of this going on. Beautiful reading and rhyming, thank you. Yeah, you meant amassing. Yeah, I got it. Indonesian food. Okay. Okay. So, now what? I mean, that's sound, that's structure in some capacity. And we do have sort of a explanation from Shake My Spear saying that this does have a deeper metaphor, hiding kernels of truth. Truly an excellent paragraph there introducing this poem. But, so let's talk about this. Let's talk about the metaphor happening in this poem, the meaning. Because we obviously have the very straightforward shit, constipation, poop meaning, which is quite comical and is great. It's very well done. But let's talk about the metaphor. Had I had the inclination, I'd have done it long ago. You can call it constipation, but I like to let it grow. When I think of all the matter that's amassing down below, I imagine how much sadder I would feel to let it go. So we have this idea of not letting things go. So I'd rather let it fill me, should my stomach still permit, though they say it's gonna kill me, but I'll never give a shit. And I mean, you do sort of tell us, shake my spear, repressed feelings as a metaphor. So some explanation happening here in terms of what the meaning is. So I don't have too much work to do necessarily. But there's a lot of things, I think. So we begin with had I had the inclination. And this very much sort of even speaks to, one, just not wanting to actually relieve oneself. And sort of not wanting to do something in general. In this case, something with the feelings, letting something go. Not actually letting these feelings go. And then there's this I like to let it grow, which I think adds to this theme in some way, because people ask, like, why are you bottling up these feelings? Why do we bottle up feelings? And it's weird because in some capacity, like, it's definitely bad for us, but sometimes we also enjoy, in some capacity, holding on to those feelings and being this sort of ball of suffering, which is strange. When I think of all the matter that's amassing down below, there's a cool double meaning here. Matter, like things that matter. Matter as a thing, matter as meaning. All the meaning down below, that sort of feeling in your gut, right? My stomach still permit. I imagine how much sadder I'd feel to let it go. So again, still just like holding on. This poem reminds me of procrastination. Yeah, Penguino Man, it does. So I'd rather let it fill me, should my stomach still permit, though they say it's gonna kill me. So really just anything that involves like waiting and inaction that causes us suffering. So procrastination would actually be like a great metaphor happening in the poem. And we can actually look at that. Had I had the inclination, I'd have done it long ago, right? We have this thing that we maybe should have done a while ago, but we don't. And it's this then constipation of mind. But we look at this thing we have to do, and we wait and we wait and we wait until the last moment. When I think of all the matter that's amassing down below, imagine how much sadder it would feel to let it go. So maybe there's this idea that if we actually go do the thing that we like have to do, maybe it won't be enjoyable. Maybe it kind of sucks. So I'd rather let it fill me, should my stomach still permit, right? We do this for as long as we can, procrastinate, until we get to the absolute edge. And I mean, even the last night, but I'll never give a shit. Like, this is maybe something we might say when we're procrastinating. Like, oh, I don't give a shit about it. I can do it later. It's fine. Whatever. It's not that important. So yeah, there's like maybe a lot of meanings happening in this poem. Oh my gosh, chat. This is teaching me a lot. I'm realizing I don't know much about poetry structure knowledge. Yeah, I'll speak to this in just a second. We were talking about food. We should send some to Ginny. Yeah, y'all. And you saw me eating licorice. Yeah, I've already had food sent to me. Kind of hard to get it to me because I don't have an address or PO box that's publicly known, and PO boxes are expensive. but I've been trying to eat one of these licorices every day to like get used to the flavor, and it's definitely more manageable than like a few days ago. um, let's see. But yeah, definitely. Or like the whole not replying to a text, and the longer it goes, the more you dread replying because of the time, until you just don't give a shit. Maybe kind of, I don't know. I'm kind of slow. No, that's like a really good one too. Like texting. We can look at that. And if anyone else has ideas that could like fit in this sort of meaning, this is like a great one too. I didn't really have an inclination to respond to this text in the first place, so I let it sit. I let that lack of inclination grow, and it gets worse and worse. And then I don't actually want to talk to this person. So then, and maybe this is something people would say, like, oh, maybe if you actually talk to people, like, if you ever responded, yeah, like they say it's gonna kill me. Like, oh, if you're not checking your phone, you're gonna miss some important message. Someone's gonna try to tell you that something bad happened, and you're not gonna see it because you're not checking your phone. But this person doesn't give a shit. It's actually something I heard when I switched to using a flip phone. And for a while, when I had a smartphone, but I wasn't carrying it with me, people would be like, what if there's an emergency? What if you need to call someone? What if you need to talk to someone? I'm like, you don't really give a shit. Like, the phone will be there when I get home, and I'll be able to see. Like, what's the worst that someone could text me? Like, oh, a family member died. Well, like, they're not going to get more dead. They're not going to get less dead. I like the phone version for this. This poem is making me sad. The poem is kind of sad. Keep a medical details card on you. That's pretty smart. The date he wrote, a cab refused to stop texting during dinner. Oh, that's brutal. That's smart. I don't really have many medical details allergies, but I guess I do have a blood type. I don't know what it is, though. So, you said, Fledgy, that you don't know that much about like structure and stuff. And that's like super okay. Because this is just like one kind of poem. This is like verse. And then we have a big category of poetry that is free verse. That's what I read at the start of this stream, was a free verse poem. Verse is structured, verse is very clear, goes like da-dum, 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 it has rhyme schemes, it has whatever. But like, this is... There's many different kinds of poetry. So you kind of don't have to. You don't have to know about structure and verse. But it's helpful because these things, being good at one can help you be actually good at the other. And I don't know how much you've watched of like the VODs on YouTube, the recordings, but I like to talk about poetry as meaning, sound, and structure. And the intersection of these things. Now, the tricky thing is that the more you focus on one of these, the more you're going to sort of pull away from the other ones. Generally. If I'm really focusing on writing a structure, let's say da-da-dum, da-da-dum, da-dum, da-dum, da-da-dum, da-dum, da-dum. I might, because I'm focusing so much on this, the structure and the sound, not focus so much on meaning. And maybe that's what happened in this poem. I mean, it's intentionally sort of light on meaning, so it's okay. The TikTok is how you found the channel. Gotcha. That's right. So we have structure, meaning, sound. And when you do more of one, you usually get less of the others. But not always. Like, there are people who can write with all of these. I've done it on occasion. People in chat have done it. Whatever. And lots of people have accomplished it. But here's the thing. Free verse, the danger that you run is that without structure, and even without like a set verse for sound, people kind of write a lot about meaning, and then they forget about the other things. And then they lose a whole 2/3 of the beauty of poetry. Sometimes people will write sonnets that have great sound and structure and do this thing, but because they're so focused on meter, they end up falling away from their meaning. And this isn't a rule. People can have balance. Balance is great. Slam poets, sometimes they do really great things with sound and meaning, and their structure is like nonsense. If you... a lot of the times, a slam poet, if they publish their slam poems into a book and put it on a page, it does not work the same because they are so fundamentally sound-based in their writing. Now, sometimes they also have good structure and can be presented well and all this stuff, but it's always this kind of trade-off. And practicing each of them is a great thing. And like, absolutely, maybe a sonnet can help you practice these two. Trying to emulate a poet can actually practice sort of any of them, because some poets have very good sound, some have structure, some have meaning, whatever. And so knowing about them is great. And like, we see all sorts of different poetry on this channel. So in fact, if you want to learn, like, maybe you're in the right place. But this. So you don't even need to feel like definitely don't feel bad about not knowing about like structure. It is super interesting to learn though. And someone said something. Y'all were talking about therapy? Maybe the poem can fix me. Get a therapist. I did actually, but I do have some underlying problems. Welcome to the club. Yup. You only write in verse to make fun of it. Fair. Wrote 2 sonnets for practice, but they were kind of one-dimensional meaning-wise. Yeah, like, and it's something you can try to prevent, and then it still happens. Now, in this case, Shake My Spear, as far as I know, writes a lot of verse poetry, and we've seen 2 verse poems from Shake My Spear, and clearly knows about it, giving this way of talking about it. But so there is still able to be some solid degree of underlying metaphor, and in this poem by Shake My Spear, without our friends though there is no air, like, great meaning. You can see how much is going on in this poem by how much I wrote on it. And so, like, it's not a rule that you can't have all of these. It's just very difficult to, you know, have the Triforce. As for therapy, I was thinking about this. Sometimes people ask me how to improve, and I think my new answer is the best way to improve as a poet is to, like, get therapy. This might actually be the best answer and be, like, healthy, because you're of no value as an artist in terms of creating if you're dead, or if you're sad and not doing anything. And some people, like, use their struggles to fuel art, and this is absolutely something that happens, and it's a great outlet. And some people think, oh, maybe when I'm better, I won't make art as good because I'm not suffering. And that, I used to think this. I used to think I had to be some amount of ill to make good art, and that's just wrong. So the best way to get better as an artist is therapy. If you get the one you jive with, it's a godsend. Dickus Magnificus, welcome. How are you? I am going to run an itsy bitsy ad. So y'all, please do not watch the ad if you're new. I don't want you to watch the ad. I want you to get up and do some kind of self-care to take care of yourself, because that's good for you. Drink water, go to the bathroom, whatever. I'll be right back. Welcome back. Still Jenny. Still the pod of Twitch. So the first thing I read was, so I'd rather let it fill me. Yep, that's the poem. Definitely easy to get discouraged. When it clicks and clicks, yes. Oh, where she goes? When I run an ad, I take a break too. Because I have to take breaks for my own health. Like the idea that suffering begets art. I like the idea that suffering begets art, but I don't think therapy eliminates it. It helps process, translate it into art better. Yes! Precisely, Fludgy. Good words. Addiction stifles. Probably. Bukowski might argue otherwise. And you don't need to suffer to make art. Yes, healthy people can be great artists. Maytari, congratulations. You got accepted into some, what was anthology, journal, magazine. Congrats. That's really cool. That means I can't invite that poem to be in our anthology, probably. But congrats. It's awesome. As an artist, for some reason, to make beautiful thing, there's always pain behind it. There can be pain behind it, but I also think we don't need to suffer to write about pain. It's not romanticizing sadness. Same Melanie, yeah. RIP, you got accepted into a thing. That's cool. But I presume that they would say something like, we are publishing you, you can't be published elsewhere. That's just kind of what happens. Here's a shitty habit again. Had I had the inclination, I'd have done it long ago. You can call it constipation, but I like to let it grow. When I think of all the matter that's amassing down below, I imagine how much sadder I would feel to let it go. So I'd rather let it fill me, should my stomach still permit, though they say it's gonna kill me. But I'll never give a shit. It's so good. A Shitty Habit by Shake My Spear. Stylish Fail, can you type we are currently reading A Shitty Habit by Shake My Spear into the chat and pin it, because I definitely didn't do that. And for that matter, this is supposed to I am supposed to have put this in a document for people to find, and I forgot, so that people can read along. And this is something I was supposed to do, and I didn't. So I'm very sorry. So I'm going to take a second. Y'all can see my face. I'm putting this into the poetry Google Drive for Poets of Twitch, basically so you all can find the things that we read here and follow along. New, create. This is, please paste. Oh, that's why. A Shitty Habit by Shake My Spear. Okay, my bad. We're so back. My bitrate just tanked. I think we're okay though. Stream looks like it's still going. Slightly grainy. Can I pin it? I can pin it. Pin. Okay, we're still reading the same thing. It's back. Okay, so in terms of, can I do this? There we go. Wait. Oh, my whole thing got bumped. That's why. It all got messed up. Okay. Froze for a bit, but it's good. Okay. Yeah. Is this... Okay, this is straight. So, this poem, we have like a few different meanings. We have the metaphor for maybe like procrastination or not wanting to talk to someone or holding feelings in whatever it might be. And I think it's pretty fun to do that, to have a slightly more complex metaphor, kernels of truth, as you said, shake my spear in a poem like this, which is very fun. You had also asked, am I able to effortlessly recite this poem? Does the rhythm flow seamlessly? So in terms of effortlessly, I mean like kind of. Effortlessly once I knew the meter. Given the explanation, had I had the inclination. That works great. I'd have done it long ago. Like, you've heard me read it a few times now, and I do think the meter works well. And in terms of flow, I mean, like, your rhyme scheme is good. You have these internal rhymes, this alliteration, this repetition to move us along. So I really have no no qualms with this. Had I had the inclination, I'd have done it long ago. You can call it constipation, but I like to let it grow. When I think of all the matter that's amassing down below, I imagine how much sadder I would feel to let it go. So I'd rather let it fill me, should my stomach still permit, though they say it's gonna kill me, but I'd never give a shit. It flows extremely well. So in terms of sound and structure, I think you've done a very good job with this. And it works. I don't know how much more I have to say, unless there are questions. Someone give me a question. I want to keep talking about this poem, because there's things related, but do you have any questions about this? Shake my spear for more clarification, help, whatever. Or does anyone have questions about this? Even just stuff about meter, general thing, whatever you want to talk about. I think the meter is pretty naturally straightforward, so I can think the better question is it clear that there's a metaphor occurring? Yeah, I mean, so here's the thing. This is why explanation is kind of evil. Once I am told that there is a metaphor, it's really the sort of thing that cannot be unseen. Once you see it, and you never unsee it. And every time you read it, it just keeps coming. Like, it keeps reinforcing. And so it's difficult for me to say clearly whether it indicates a metaphor. However, I think you do talk about a few things that maybe point toward it. I'll never give a shit. Just having the double meaning of not really caring. The sort of apathy of had I had the inclination, I'd have done it long ago. When I think of all the matter, things that matter, the feelings, the whatever. So this is communicated, I can see now, having been explained. So I'd rather let it fill me should my stomach still permit. Though they say it's going to kill me, but I'll never give a shit. And I think even something like a shitty habit, bad habits, like, I feel like most people reading a poem aren't necessarily going to assume, I don't know, maybe this is coming from my own perspective, but I tend to assume there's more going on in a poem. I tend to assume metaphor. And I think given how poetry works, people tend to assume it. Whether or not people get to metaphor or deeper meaning is another story. But people will always kind of ask, like, oh, but what does this mean? What are you saying here? What's the metaphor? When they read a poem, the issue is usually getting to it. And I do think you have some indication, some things that point to and maybe contribute to the idea of the metaphor. But, of course, I don't have the experience of coming to knowing the metaphor myself because it was explained ahead of time. I've not been very confident in the metaphor when I submitted it, so my bad for mentioning the metaphor. I mean, it's okay. It just means that, like, I guess y'all can know. You all are perfectly free to explain the shit out of your poems. Pun intended. You can explain your poems when you send them to me. It just means you do not get to know what conclusion I naturally come to. It's kind of impossible. Because I can still poke around at this poem and try to pull out other meanings, but it gets very, very difficult to generate new ideas once you hear from the author. And I don't even consider, like, the author to be an authority. I didn't realize that until now that those very clearly come from the same root, author, authority, on the work. Because sort of the point of art is to let go of control and give it to your audience. But I think most of the time when we see something explained by the author, it is really, really hard to then divorce ourselves from that idea. Death of the author inside you. Yeah. I know it's not like a complete answer to that question, Shake My Spear. But I would say an easy way to know if people pick up on the metaphor is to just keep sharing it with people. And if everyone just looks at it as a funny poem, then yeah, maybe you need to do more for the metaphor. Or you let the metaphor be something buried and difficult to find. Or you just say, I've written this poem, it's done, I let go of it, and now the audience can do whatever they want with it. It's a hard thing as an author. Fully agree with you, Jenny, but I always find it so hard to shut up when people discuss my stuff. Absolutely. It's why for a while I had a really hard rule on myself to not explain my poems. Because I completely understand how easy it is to want to explain them. But I also more so know how fulfilling it is to sit there and grapple with a poem and try to pull different ideas from it instead of just having meaning sort of spoon-fed. Self-restraint. You're going to go to sleep now. Waiter Melanie. Well, have a good sleep. Good to have you in chat. And see you around. Any other questions on this work? Same. It's like holding in a sneeze. Yes, it is very difficult. And the thing is that, I mean, a lot of people don't actually want to engage with your poems in a way that is sort of comprehensive. Most people are not going to read your poems like this, so it's sort of automatic to have to explain when they ask you what it means. Since I'm a jerk, when someone asks me what my poem means, usually I just turn the question around. And I'm like, what do you think it means? What do you think it means? And then it gives them a little challenge and it flexes their reading comprehension muscles because we love having things explained to us. Like anytime you watch a movie, you can go look up on the internet movie meaning, movie metaphor. You can find a video essay on the meaning of any whatever poem or piece of art. And I think it is this that has sort of really killed this little thing we call media literacy, which I talk about surprisingly little on this channel. Media literacy. This is to be able to understand, draw value, draw meaning from media. That can be music, that can be poetry, that can be movies, dance, just any art, freaking like news articles. That's all media. We usually talk about artistic media when we say media literacy, but I think it's mostly because no one actually has to practice this. We live in a world where if you go on genius.com and type in any song that has a decent number of is by someone who has a decent number of fans, let's say, you can find the full lyrics, and often there will be a whole bunch of explanation on what the song means. And this means you as a person do not actually have to do that. Literacy goes beyond the literal text as well. Yes, we also have to look, let's say, with a piece of music. Let's take a song by Kendrick Lamar. Doesn't really matter what, but we have to understand like where he's from and his background. We have to understand that he is like a black man in America. We have to understand, maybe with certain songs, let's say like Not Like Us, part of media literacy of understanding the song is understanding that he like had beef with Drake, and this was like their feud. And without taking the time to like understand all of these things, some easier, some more straightforward than others, then it becomes really hard to understand a song like this in its entirety. When Kendrick Lamar shoots at Drake for being a pedophile, let's say, you're not going to really understand this line unless you have some idea of like the Drake sort of pedophilia allegations. That's media literacy. Asking myself who benefits from this framing whenever I watch news makes things much clearer. Yes, this is a really powerful question, Fledgy. I like this. Who benefits from this framing? I'd say the easiest example in recent news, particularly in America, is anytime the news is talking about, and I'm going to say a political thing, Israel, Gaza. There are little nuances to this. Some people will call it the war in Israel. Some will call it the genocide in Gaza. And depending on how you say it, it absolutely subtly changes the framing of who benefits. If it's a genocide in Gaza, clear victim. If it's a war in Israel, much more toned down version of that, which of course benefits this side to say. Describing it as a genocide in Gaza, in some cases, like in some capacity, creates sympathy for this side. If we talk about like all of the things around this, which hostages we talk about, or which numbers we decide to say, or which pictures we show on the news, all of that is going to change who is benefiting, who is shown in a good light in this conflict. And this goes for all things. Sometimes the people benefiting off of certain news stories are like the media moguls and the like news stations themselves. Sometimes it is to prop up one political party or another. So this is an excellent question to ask for everything. Fun fact, my class on propaganda used a Fox News as the textbook example. Exactly. Their example was about the Gaza tunnels. Yeah. Like even the framing of something as a tunnel and how they talk about the tunnels and people running around underground has different benefit depending on how it is framed. Yep, mainly aid, normal, goods. Yeah, but when you look at the tunnels as something illicit, something underground, something bad, it's like clearly points to these people as more criminal if you call these secret underground smuggling tunnels. They're just trying to get food. Oh god, yeah, I remember that news cycle. Even the funny thing, news cycle benefits certain people and does not benefit others. News cycle, in fact, benefits the media by having a cycle where we go from one story, which we get really attached to another story, to another one, to another one, makes us keep staying in touch with the news, because otherwise, if we're not paying attention to this cycle, we're like, we can't talk about what's going on in the world. And then every month or so, maybe 2 weeks, we change to something new. So when we have something like a war still happening in Ukraine, we just got like ceasefire in Gaza, but that is basically, I mean, I would say Gaza was out of the news cycle for like a good 8 months last year, where it doesn't actually benefit the victims or cause any meaningful change to have this reporting, because all it does is create a glorified version of entertainment in the same way that we would have a new season on a TV show. Um, this is why I don't like watching the news because literally it gets framed as this. The US presidential debate was described on like leading up to it as like this decisive battle for democracy. They would talk about the debate as like the biggest moment in the, even we say, the presidential race. We call it a race because then it's something we can root for someone and root for the other and see who's pulling ahead and behind and look at polls and stuff, when really there's no race. There is a day with a vote. No one is ahead or behind. This is why polls are like so useless, because it's not a presidential race, it's a presidential vote. Started to listen to an audiobook by Ken Follett, The Pillars of Earth. 48 hours can tips it to everyone. Pillars of Earth. 48 hours long. Ken tips it to everyone. So far, it is really good. I understand half of that message, Kademon. But it's called The Pillars of the Earth. I've not heard of that book. What is it about in general? Let's see. It sounds interesting. Pillars of the Earth. I think you're saying it has tips that are useful to anyone. Pillars of the Earth, set in the 12th century. Oh, interesting. Cathedral in a fictional town. Gothic architecture. Okay, this sounds kind of sick. We'll have a good chance of killing people underground if we kill everyone above ground. Yeah, like, it's wild. One thing I do want to mention, I do hear a lot of people saying that something is a distraction from the real issue. It can lead to pretty conspiratorial thinking. Of course, yeah. Vapid inflammatory BS will have headlines. Yeah, and it's not that, definitely not that the news is some distraction. The whole, like, distraction from the real issue. Like, generally what the news is talking about is, like, real. Most news stations most of the time are not putting forth full-on false information. But everyone is taking their information and framing it in a certain way. In Holland, political candidates have limitations on how much and how long they get to campaign, so much less fanfare. Yeah. Election season is a year in America. It's really bad. That was sort of entirely a tangent from the poem, but a useful discussion nonetheless. What were we talking about? Oh, we were talking about music and context. So, to get back to this, why does this work? Right, I'm talking about politics because I'm getting us back to the poem. Why does this work? It works because most people don't bother to get the full context. Most people have their one news source. For a bunch of America, that is Fox. They can even get their sports from Fox too. It's pretty great. Some people have CNN or BBC. It doesn't really matter. But the point is, people don't really take the time, in terms of any media, to get the full context. And we generally have to assume that people will be exactly the same with our art, because we see it everywhere in actual life, that people are not spending that much time to understand and be literate with their media. So, to return to music, this is why people talk about how bad media literacy is in this time, in this generation, because it's not that no one knows how to understand things or how to understand media. Everyone is just sort of pushed into their own little corner of life where they have their like one interpretation that's completely isolated from this interpretation, which are completely isolated from this one. And that means we just take our own little worldview and place it on to the media. Ideally, I think, when we are reading poems or reading media, we should not be reading ourselves. Most people, in the same way, will inject their own beliefs into the news, a piece of art, in the same way that people just find news that aligns with their own beliefs. So we shouldn't read ourselves. Ideally, we go into a piece of art with an open mind. And the more open the mind is, the more likely we are to see new things and not just reaffirm what we already believe. So, I think looking at a poem like this, when we read it the first time, we are sort of inclined to say, this is a poem about poop. That is what it is on the surface. Keeping the open mind beyond a first impression, beyond our initial knee-jerk reaction, allows us then to break down the poem and see maybe there is more to this. There is more metaphor. There is more going on. There's a lot of interesting verse happening. There's cool stuff. But most people like to read something once and move on. And in some capacity, I mean, this channel does the opposite of that. I sit with a poem for an hour or more, sometimes less, sometimes 2.5 hours, and really pick at it and pull at all the angles, which is not what people do in our modern day. Probably because of the internet, probably because of distraction, probably because needing to do things in capitalism or whatever. But it's so fulfilling to sit and slow down and actually take the time to understand a piece of art, a movie, a song, a political issue, anything. Yourself, that's a good one. Another person. So maybe it's just the plight of being an artist in the modern day that, like, it is really hard. Shake my spear. You said it's hard to be confident in my metaphor. And of course it would be, because we know that if a metaphor isn't obvious enough, no one will get it. And if a metaphor is too veiled, we have to explain it to the other person, and that's not quite so fulfilling. That kind of sucks. They didn't get it. They didn't find the deeper value or meaning. And I don't know. I think people clearly want to be able to understand things in a greater capacity. We like knowing things. We like being able to look at the world and understand what's going on. That's why we consume so much news. So, and I think that goes to show, like, with people actually enjoying, let's say, the content on this channel. A lot of people come in and say, wow, this is teaching me how to do things that I didn't know how to do, and now I can understand art in a deeper capacity. And to be clear, all of this process can sort of, in some capacity, be applied to every other art. You just have to change these categories and change your framing. But it's also really, really hard to get people to slow down and spend time thinking. That kind of sucks. We get that poop around here. People overanalyze our poems. Yes. Yes. Exactly. So, I don't know what the answer is, Len. Is the metaphor clear enough? Because a clear metaphor almost isn't a metaphor at all. There's joy in finding things, finding secrets in a poem. I'm sure y'all have had this experience. This is probably a more common and relatable thing than poetry. Listening to a song. Your favorite song. You listened to it the first time, you understood some things. And every time you went back, sometimes you would just enjoy it for what it was, and sometimes you'd really pay attention to the lyrics and notice, wait, I didn't realize that's what that lyric meant. And it's when you do that, take that time to notice a new thing, gain a little more meaning, that the song becomes that much better. And it's just a little fulfilling moment where you've gained some understanding. You've done some analysis, kind of on accident. And the thing is, like, that's a passive version of it. That's something more people understand because it's easier to do, to accidentally stumble into that analysis. That's all I do. I just sit here and listen to the song over and over and over again on the Twitch channel. And then once I listen to the song enough, I understand things. I do that on purpose when I re-listen to music. Exactly, Maytari. And we can do the exact same thing with poetry. This is maybe one of the better ways I've been able to describe analysis. All I do is listen to the song over and over and over again. And every time I read this, I notice something new. So, that. New poetry prompt. Write a poem that completely explains every bit of meaning to its reader, but there's actually a hidden layer of meaning not explained. That sounds very difficult to write. I would love to see you do that, Shake My Spear. I like the idea of a poem being meta in the capacity that it will try to explain what it is saying to the reader, but then there's something underneath it. Then there's sort of like an unreliable narrator aspect to it. Maybe that's really cool. Celestial Pratchett has been my special interest for many years, and I still find new stuff. Yeah, and it's going back and reading the same book multiple times, or just, in the case of Pratchett, reading the dozens of odd Discworld books and finding new things about the world and connections. The last step is to look at those different times when you've read things and make the connections. Ooh, maybe you can do something with like edits or notes in the text files. That's a thing. There's a book called House of Leaves, which I haven't read, which apparently is kind of like this, where it's a book, and then part of the book is like editor's notes in the margins, and it adds to the story. I haven't read it. I really want to read it. I don't have it yet. And so you could do something like that with a poem. That would be a way. Have it, not started it. You should. It's gorgeous, just as a book. I like gorgeous books. I have some gorgeous books. So, all that conversation did kind of wrap back to the poem and this idea of metaphor and maybe the struggle of communicating metaphor and meaning. So that's good that we're now back. Any last questions about poetry specifically related to this poem? Comments for Shake My Spear? I think it's a fun poem. You said earlier you have another thing submitted. There are about 6 more things in queue, I think. So I'm not going to read another one of yours. I try to not read the same poet like twice in a stream or even like 2 days in a row. It's just not my jam. I like the lines. You can call it constipation, but I like to let it grow. It's in the middle of the screen. You've been staring at it for like 20 minutes. You can call it constipation, but I like to let it grow. Yeah, you call it this like this physical issue, but I like it. And in the metaphor, you call, we can even say procrastination, but I like this. You can call it a bad thing, this problem. But I'm enjoying this. Kind of knowing others have good advice, but you still don't follow it. That too. Like that's probably a reasonable advice to follow. But I'm just enjoying this. All right. Here's a shitty habit. Oh, yes, my note is that I like it. I love crude metaphor. Yeah, it's a fun take. The crude surface with the metaphor for the deeper thing. As Shake My Spear said, gross and distasteful on the surface, but like a poop hiding kernels of truth. Perhaps a metaphor for repressed feelings. Truly great. Sounds like it should be a campfire song. That's so real. A shitty habit. Had I had the inclination, I'd have done it long ago. You can call it constipation, but I like to let it grow. When I think of all the matter that's amassing down below, I imagine how much sadder I would feel to let it go. So I'd rather let it fill me, should my stomach still permit. Though they say it's gonna kill me, but I'll never give a shit. A Shitty Habit by Shake My Spear. Thank you for submitting. Very fun stuff. Bim bim bim. Bukowski would probably hate this poem. But Bukowski's dumb. Yeah, good.
Thank you for watching. I encourage you to check out the rest of the series, follow if you enjoyed, and stop by Twitch if you want to share your own work. See you there.